15 seconds, studio. Stand by.
Right, coming to Betty on 1, super
10,
opening
9,
caption, coming
8,
down to 2.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, on air.
Education, sport and culture sub-panel at the moment, but I think media needs to be added to it, because if we've seen, we haven't got the advantage that they have in the UK and most larger jurisdictions, where you've got many different papers with many different political perspectives, you've got several TV channels. You know, we're far more limited in Jersey, so I think when those problems arise and it becomes apparent that certain ideas, certain viewpoints are being put out almost as a party line, then I think you have to be able to have some sort of interaction so that can be challenged. Not, you know, you're not going to be telling media what to say, but journalists have said to me in the past, it was better before when we actually had to go out and dig. Now we get stuff from the communications unit, and it's spin. It's the angle that the ministries want to put out.
I think media is certainly an area which needs valid scrutiny, and it could fall under probably the ESC committee. You know, Education Home Affairs would probably be the logical place to slot that in. But again, it needs people on that committee who are going to be committed and impartial, reasonably, you know, as impartial as anybody can be, to making sure that works. But I think, again, that's going to be of limited use in reality, because in Jersey, we know that, I certainly believe that there is a too cosy relationship between the media and the government. And sometimes that's not necessarily because there's a philosophical agreement between the media and the state in terms of idea. It's purely because it's easy to actually be drip-fed your press releases, so you get a press release from the Chief Minister's Department, from the Treasury, wherever, and that's the news. It saves anybody having to do any work. And also, of course, let's not forget that the JEP receive their money from two main sources. One of them is the government. I think it's something like...
I think it's about 277,000.
I was going to say 250, but it varies. I think it's 277, wasn't it? That's money that the taxpayer is paying to the JEP. And then you've also got you know, private commercial advertising from many of the big businesses.
You'd probably be aware that at the moment there's a disparity in the regulations as to who can film scrutiny meetings. So whilst it's perfectly fine for Channel Television and BBC to come in because they're what the states have deemed accredited media, it's not satisfactory at the moment under their regulations for internet bloggers or any member of the public who wishes to come in with a video camera.
It's supposed to be a public meeting, of course. In theory, anybody, or in practice, anybody ought to be allowed to be in there, and everybody ought to be treated the same.
That's right. I mean, in that respect, it's a public meeting as far as anyone can turn up. The only difference is if you turn up with a camera, you will only be allowed to film if you're part of what they call the accredited media. That's something which I don't think is fair.
Well, there's obviously...
Good evening and welcome to the programme. Channel Television is to be sold to the ITV Group.
Firstly, local people want local news. But secondly, it's vitally important in broadcasting to maintain plurality of service. And what I mean is more than one person providing or company providing the news to get a balance.
Let's watch Channel 9, tell it. Please watch Channel TV. Do watch Channel 9, tell it. For it's better than the BBC.
I think the real reason that National ITV are looking to purchase Channel TV is for the compliance section of their company.
Well, Channel Television isn't just about news. Part of the company is a compliance business based in London.
profitable side of the business, the compliance side?
Two ways to comply programmes, either through ITV plc or through channel television. That introduces in our minds some great inefficiencies into the system.
Compliance.
Compliance was a big factor, wasn't it?
I think compliance was a big factor.
So we've seen other regions pared down and down to cut costs. We've seen technicians lose their jobs as a result and being replaced with video journalists. Is that a plan for our region?
Over time, ITV has needed to reduce the amount it spent on regional broadcasting so that the value of the regional licences and the cost of the regional licences were in alignment.
Over the next year or so, we've been hearing this morning about a culture of distrust in some quarters over Jersey's political system and its media. And so we've raised the question of whether or not the island can conduct its own affairs and run itself openly and honestly. The editor of BBC Radio Jersey, John Gripton, has already given us his views, and he'll stay with us. But also, let's welcome now Mike Dunn, a citizen journalist and blogger and political activist, and States member Deputy Trevor Pittman, who also blogs. Mike Dunn, do you believe there is a culture of secrecy and cover-up in Jersey?
Culture of is a tradition of, well, I don't know when a tradition becomes a culture, but there's certainly a way of life here which is very protective, and the word is always reputation, isn't it?
The media in Jersey has been wholly captured by the island's entrenched oligarchy, and has been for decades actually. If you, for example, study the wretched history of the Jersey Evening Post, even back from post-war years into the decades immediately following World War II, the extremist, lunatic propaganda that the Jersey Evening Post churned out against anyone that stood up and might become a prominent opposition figure to the oligarchy. These people were absolutely hammered and treated disgracefully, like old Norman de Brock, for example, the disgraceful treatment he had to endure at the hands of the Jersey Evening Post. So Jersey's media has always been corrupt and biased. I think the most difficult thing, I suppose, that has to be considered with the performance of the mainstream media in Jersey is the role of the BBC. I mean, we can't be surprised that Channel Television, FM 103 and the Jersey Evening Post in particular are just nakedly unashamed propaganda vessels for the oligarchy, which they are. I mean, anyone can, read the published facts, the evidenced facts. People can now read for themselves on my blog, on your blog, on Mr. Sauder's blog, on other blogs too. And this is the great problem, of course, that the Jersey media now face, which is why they have to oppress people like me, because in the decades gone by, they've had the total control over what the public did or didn't get to know. With the age of the internet, of course, that control, that power is gone. And sooner or later, it hasn't happened yet, but I think it's an inevitability, the broad population of Jersey will wake up to the fact that, hold on a minute, everything that's appearing or everything that's being omitted in our mainstream media, this is very serious actually, and here are these independent journalists, web-based journalists, who are actually publishing the factual evidence. And that's a very difficult thing for the Jersey mainstream media, because one day suddenly their entire credibility will collapse in the eyes of the broad population, which is another reason why the Jersey establishment has to oppress citizens media journalists, because we're a threat to the whole credibility of their traditional propaganda apparatus. The BBC's position is extremely serious. I mean, the BBC in Jersey has effectively been captured. For example, the BBC has in their possession a copy of the 94-page statement written by the former Chief of Police Graham Power to the Wiltshire Police Force. And this is a dynamite piece of evidence, very substantial.
How long have they had this statement? I think it's close on to 3 months.
Probably going on for 4 months, I would say now. They've had this absolutely dynamite, apocalyptic piece of evidence. Now, to any self-respecting journalist, you get handed a piece of evidence like this on a plate, without even having to go out and look for it, without having to do any work and do any investigative work. Somebody's come to you and given you this absolutely extraordinary evidential document of historic significance. And this, to any self-respecting journalist, this would be like all your Christmases had come at once. You'd be, God, I can't wait to get stories out about this. Go seek out the people in the report, question them, seek their side of the story. There's been a deafening silence about this from the BBC. Now, the BBC holds itself up, and indeed the British establishment hold the BBC up as perhaps the shining example of media to the rest of the world. supposedly the most reliable, the most non-political, the most fearless, the absolutely purest media in the world. Now that's the image that the BBC has of itself, it's the image that the British government has of the BBC, and this is the image that is projected to the rest of the world. Yet the BBC has quite clearly, on the evidence, been wholly corrupted in respect of its coverage in Jersey, and indeed nationally. The BBC has effectively had to go along with the captured state of BBC Jersey by not reporting stories that they've been given nationally that might contradict the local corrupted stance that BBC Jersey has taken.
But it brings us to the power at the end of the day that the Jersey Evening Post holds. We've got to, for our overseas viewers especially, they've got to know that this is only one newspaper on this island of 90,000 people. I would put it to you, I think, it's my opinion, they're going to bury you. And they've buried people, and it's my opinion, they've buried people in the past. And this is the power that they wield. They're more powerful than you or any of our politicians.
They are powerful, and that's why I don't often give interviews on blogs, but I do obviously use new media, and I think new media is very powerful. I think the foundation of democracy is plurality of media. I think free speech is important, and I think that's why blogs, the use of Twitter, the use of Facebook is actually the modern way in which you can get messages out. And I do get my messages out, and I try and communicate. I represent every elector in Jersey. It's my job to work for every elector in Jersey, and I provide them now with an alternative way that they can communicate and they can express their views, and I can also tell them what they're doing. Because the world is changing, and the power of the newspaper is obviously also falling, as Rupert Murdoch himself said.
Well, exactly. Well, that brings us on. Don't forget, Rupert Murdoch only had 43% of the market readership. He was one of the most feared, influential men in Britain, with 43% of the market readership. Now, when we put that in Jersey's context, when the Jersey Evening Post has got 100% of the market readership, that makes them very powerful people.
The JP is powerful, and of course their ability to write headlines is of course very powerful. They will always suggest, one thing I will say of any written journal is that if you actually read the article, often there will be both sides of the story in it. Not always, but sometimes.
What, in the Jersey Evening Post?
Well, I'm saying that a lot of the written media will represent, and if you look for both sides of the story, you will find it. But of course, a lot of people are then instructed about what the article says by the headlines. And so the headline is going to almost set the scene, and that's one of the difficulties. And I understand the difficulty that the print media have because they want to sell newspapers. I don't think people must believe that newspapers are there for some benevolent purpose of reporting what is the right and an accurate thing. They're there to sell newspapers, and we must understand that. Which is why I also think that some of the other media, and I also try to be fair with the other media, of giving them access to me as a decision maker, and I must be held accountable by others too. It's not only about the JP, and the JP's power in Jersey is certainly waning.